Hi, I'm Charles with AniCap. Previously, a man was reincarnated as Shin, a boy raised in the woods by his legendary magician grandfather. Shin then goes to a magic academy to learn about the world, and see just how much more powerful he is than everyone else. There, he would meet a bully that would become only the second demonoid in history. Demonoids are able to destroy entire countries, but everyone was shocked to find that Shin defeats this one all on his own. The story continues as Mr. Strom celebrates his successful experiment in changing Kurt into a demonoid as he watches Shin. In the school, Shin wonders if it's really that easy for someone to become a demonoid. It's a valid question, seeing as how the only other demonoid to ever exist was an extremely high-level magician that lost control of a powerful spell. Kurt wasn't nearly as powerful, so Shin begins to wonder if his transformation was artificially induced. Merlin once explained to Shin that demonoids can only howl, but Shin reveals that Kurt was clearly able to speak. Furthermore, Kurt seemed too weak to be a full demonoid, and speculates that he might have been part of a human experimentation. Afterwards, Shin returns home to find the king there, and is told that he will be awarded the First Order of Merit for defeating the demonoid. Merlin assumes that the king is attempting to use Shin's immense strength for his own political gain, but he explains that it is actually the returning threat of the demonoids that has forced him to make the matter public. Merlin questions the reasoning behind the award though, and the king explains that it's only right since Shin accomplished alone what Merlin and Melita could only do together. The king states that he would never exploit Shin and what he is doing is for the people. Merlin accepts this explanation but warns that they will leave the kingdom if the king breaks his word. As Shin walks the streets, several people begin to recognize him as the new hero that defeated a demonoid all by himself. Onlookers assume that someone as strong as Shin must already be taken, and determine that Cecilian must be his fiancée. At school, Mr. Marcus has a hard time holding students back as they want to join Shin's study group to learn from him. He decides to only allow those that can use interdimensional storage magic to take a test for a chance at getting into the study group. Elsewhere, the nation's leaders discuss how Shin believes that the demonoid was artificially created, and determine that they must investigate the situation themselves. At the study group, the only students that Mr. Marcus allowed to join are introduced. One is Mark, whose family smiths weapons, and the other is Olivia, whose family runs a popular restaurant. Getting a reservation at the restaurant is almost impossible, but Olivia invites them to eat there one day. Shin then asks if Mark can make him a new weapon, but Mark doesn't even want to try, since he doesn't think he could replace the weapon that Shin used to defeat the demonoid. Shin reveals that it was just a regular sword that he enchanted with magic to make the blade vibrate at ultrasonic speed. Doing this allows him to cut almost anything without any force at all, so he just needs a slight change in his weapon. Mark agrees to give it a shot as everyone marvels at how skilled Shin is at enchanting. Elsewhere, investigators see that Kurt was visited by Mr. Strom the day he demonized, and go to question him. One investigator wonders if Strom uses sensory magic because of the patch over his eyes and his ability to move around normally. Strom doesn't give a definitive answer, and the investigator asks what happened to his eyes. Strom explains that he was born as a noble, but during a power struggle, a family member attempted to fatally wound him. He managed to survive, but his eyes did not. The investigator then questions him about how eager he was to invite as many students as he could to join his study group. Mr. Strom explains that he had been exiled from the Empire, and felt that he needed to show tangible results to establish himself at the school. He was very successful as all the students increased their magical power greatly, which makes what happened to Kurt much more devastating for him. The brilliant investigator believes Strom and asks that he help examine Kurt's demonized corpse, since he is such a high-level magician, and Strom agrees to. At lunch, Shin explains that his ideal sword would combine both a thin blade and increased durability. Those are contradicting attributes though, so the others wonder why he can't just buy a new sword every time it breaks, since his family is wealthy. Shin explains that Melita doesn't allow Merlin to give him much of an allowance, since she wants him to learn the value of money. They come up with the idea to make the sword so that the blade is easily replaceable, and the group decide to head to Mark's smith shop after school. Later, Strom arrives to examine Kurt's body, but finds that the investigator had lied, and intends to investigate his corpse instead. The investigator explains that the king made sure that no one knew the name of the person that had demonized, so it was clear that Strom was responsible since he knew it was Kurt. Strom isn't concerned one bit and laughs at how he didn't realize Kurt's name was a secret. He shocks everyone when he reveals that it was all for an experiment, and states that he has completed all his experiments in the capital. Strom no longer has a reason to stay, but the guards prepare to stop him. Just then, our group walk outside when an explosion reveals Strom to the group. Shin becomes enraged when he learns that Strom was the reason Kurt demonized, and Strom explains how easily he manipulated him. Shin does his best to attack the teacher, but Strom knows his sword is enchanted and easily avoids it. Strom is then surprised to see that Shin can't use floating magic, but Shin reveals that he can still go airborne for moments at a time as he lands an attack. Strom defends himself well again, but his patch is destroyed, revealing red eyes. He reveals that he is actually a demonoid, and Shin wonders how Strom's reasoning remains intact. Strom explains that he is an exception and that humans are nothing but test subjects to him now. Shin determines that he must stop Strom immediately, but misses his attack. Strom believes that Shin missed out of fear, but Shin thinks about how he only needs a moment to show what his true power can do, as we are shown a gigantic spell forming in the sky. Strom continues to taunt Shin and only stops when he realizes what Shin had planned, but it's too late. The attack is immense, leaving Strom's body nowhere to be found, and the other students see that the heat ray Shin created was able to turn the ground into glass. Shin's search magic can't detect Strom, but Shin wonders if he is really done for. Captains of the nation, Dominic and Rupert, arrive to compliment Shin on a job well done, and ask what exactly he did. Shin then goes on to explain the complicated process of converging the light from the sun and astonishes everyone. Shin has clearly confused everyone and wonders to himself if his heat ray was really the only reason behind the ground turning into glass. Elsewhere, we see that Strom is still alive as he thinks about how he narrowly escaped death. He determines that Shin is an extremely dangerous person and he must take extra caution in making sure he doesn't interfere with his evil plans. Later, Melita and Rose gossip about how head over heels Shin and Sicilian are for each other. Afterwards, Shin explains to Og that it's very likely that Strom is still alive. Shin tested his spell alone and found that it doesn't result in an explosion. He believes Strom actually created the explosion and used it to trick everyone. Og explains that Shin can get whatever weapon he wants as the king will be sponsoring him, because Shin is the only person that can stand against Strom. They arrive at Mark Smith's shop and are surprised to see that Olivia is there so early, as the girls take her away for questioning. Inside, the Smith is rude to our group since he is so busy, but is shocked to hear that the prince has come to the shop. He is stunned a second time when he learns that Shin is Merlin's son and the person that had recently defeated a demonoid alone. With a completely new attitude, the Smith is now honored to make Shin a new type of sword. Elsewhere, a man named Zest explains that the kingdom is in chaos due to the rising number of demons within the borders, and the man sees it as an opportunity to take the land for himself. Back at the shop, Mark explains that they sell other things as well, and Sicilian is surprised to hear that Shin wants to buy her a piece of jewelry. She is greatly disappointed though when he explains that the jewelry just needs to withstand being enchanted, and its looks don't matter at all. Sicilian realizes he was just being practical, and Shin is scolded for leading her on. Inside, Shin doesn't mind getting her something she would like, and ends up picking something for her as that is what she would prefer. Afterwards, Shin arrives at his award ceremony and is greeted with applause. He is both humbled and honored to accept the award. The king uses the opportunity to tell everyone about his promise to not use Shin for political gain, and how breaking the promise will cause them to leave. Shin is amazed to see that his uncle ends the ceremony early and is a man of his word. The next day, Shin's house is surrounded by those that want to see the newly awarded hero, so he decides to use the gate to go to school. Of course, this shocks the other students, and he explains how it's a bit different from teleportation. To teleport something, you would have to move it from one place to another, but his gate just reduces the distance between two places. The concept is too difficult for the others to understand, but Shin explains that they might be able to use it one day since they are in study group together. Shin then gets an idea about putting everyone in a boot camp and leveling them all up. He decides to start with checking how much magic they are able to control, since high level magic requires you to gather lots of magic power. Shin then has Maria form a magic barrier, but instantly reveals that what she made is far too thin and completely useless. Sicilian is next to try and she forms a powerful barrier. Shin explains that he enchanted the ring he gave her and it now gathers magic power on its own. Magic barriers are very simple as they are just walls of magic power, and a direct indicator of how strong a magician is. Shin then shows them just a portion of the magic he controls and they can barely handle such dense magic. He explains that they aren't even close to where they need to be and that they will practice magic control every single day. Elsewhere, Strom is glad to hear that the kingdom is preparing for war and credits Zest for playing his role so well. He plans to sit back and watch as everyone dances for him while he laughs maniacally. Shin returns home with his friends and explains how his new fame has forced him to use gates to move about. His friends then realize that since they are being trained by Shin, and Shin was trained by Merlin, then they are technically second generation students of the legendary sorcerer. However, Merlin explains that he only taught Shin the basics, and much of what Shin knows he learned on his own. Merlin explains Shin's unique ability to see deeper into what makes a spell, but gives them confidence when he shows how he learned to use Shin's gate. Afterwards, Melita states that she realizes why Merlin learned the gate spell. She has noticed that Shin's immense and unique power has made him an outlier. Melita credits Merlin for learning it so Shin doesn't feel alone, but he only denies it. We then see that the smith has prepared a prototype for Shin, and Shin is amazed to see how it is able to release the blade with the push of a button. Og then asks for permission to mass produce Shin's sword for the army, and reveals that it's because war is close at hand. He explains that the Empire is attacking for an unknown reason, and if things get really bad, then they may be forced to enlist students. Og wants to make it clear, however, that they appreciate Shin's help with the demonoid, and would never drag him into a war. However, Shin states that he won't have to be dragged, since if his friends are in trouble, then he will gladly go to war. Elsewhere, the leader of the Empire is furious to see that Zest's intel was wrong. The kingdom did not seem to have been through a demon outbreak, as they are clearly prepared for the Empire's attack. The Emperor is even more furious to hear that Zest has fled the Empire, and he vows to have him executed. Just then, he is informed that a demon outburst has appeared back at the Empire, and he instructs their army to retreat to handle the situation. The kingdom's army plans to chase them, but a messenger reveals that demons are preventing them from doing so, which makes them wonder if the demons are strangely helping them retreat. Back at the Empire, we see the horrific way demons are rampaging, and Strom's newly transformed demonoid companion explains how strong she feels. Strom explains that Zest and the others will be returning soon, so they should prepare for their arrival. The Emperor returns to hear that the situation will soon be under control, but is shocked to find Strom on his throne, and his life is ended very soon after. Outside, some of the kingdom's soldiers arrive to find the Empire in shambles, and Strom speaks to them from a distance as he reveals that he is the cause of the destruction. It then becomes very clear that he is the cause of the entire war, and he shocks everyone with what is seemingly a group of demonoids. Back at the kingdom, Dominic explains that they had to run as Strom has at least 12 demonoids at his side. In class, it is explained that Strom now has full control of the Empire. The kingdom's army is being prepared, but in the worst case scenario, the students will have to be prepared as well. Afterwards, everyone prepares for joint training sessions with the Knight military. They all have long faces, as Maria explains that while their group focuses solely on improving their magic, the students of the Knight military work out all day. This wouldn't be so bad on its own, but they are all bullies that mock the mages for being so scrawny. Shin would like for everyone to put their differences aside, but the others dislike how the student knights think they are superior to them. Shin explains that everyone has their strengths and weaknesses, but it's pointed out how Shin doesn't since he excels at both magic and sword fighting. They wonder how he is so skilled with the sword, and are shocked when Shin explains that he was trained by someone named Mihel. The group must then explain to him that Mihel is actually the legendary knight commander known as the Knight Saint. The others assume Shin can't be made fun of since he was trained by the greatest swordsman in the kingdom, but Og thinks they still might out of jealousy. Shin still thinks that they should try to get along, but everyone disagrees. At training, students from each class will form groups of 8 and will go up against demons. Shin's group of 4 is paired with a group of student knights, and the knights are very rude to them. The knights are insulted when Shin asks if they have fought a demon before, since they think he is just looking for an opportunity to brag about the demonoid he killed. He once again asks that everyone put their prejudice aside, and explains that if they don't, then they will all surely die. The knights are extremely confident though, and just ask that everyone get out of their way. They back down, however, when the prince speaks up and asks that they learn to get along with his peers. It's clear that the knights won't change their mind, so Og instructs Shin to let them fight on their own and only jump in if things get dire. Og wants the knights to learn the importance of having a magician on the team, and the knights agree to fight on their own. Afterwards, the students realize that they were assigned to a very dangerous area since they are S-class students. They are welcomed by 2 people that Shin knows as his big brother and big sister, but they get a frantic reaction from all the students. Og explains that it's because they're famously known for being the knight and magician in charge of protecting the king. They will serve as the advisors for Shin's group and agree that letting the knights fight on their own is a good way to teach them the importance of teaming with the magician. Moments later, Shin senses something coming and the knights in training prepare for battle. They find that it's a demonized boar and the knights are eager to show what they can do. They are all quickly defeated though, and before they are all destroyed, Shin must step in to save them. Chris explains to the knights in training that they are all extremely weak, and must use that fact to motivate themselves. Sicilian then arrives to heal their wounds, and the knights are all grateful for such kindness, which makes Shin extremely jealous. Og recommends he proclaim his love for Sicilian to stop the others from talking to her, but another demon is sensed. Shin points out how there are actually several demons and one seems very powerful. Just then, another group runs towards them and shocks everyone when they explain that there are at least 100 demons approaching rapidly. Shin stuns everyone when he asks Zeke for permission to handle the demon pack alone, and Zeke agrees confidently. Everyone moves away as Shin prepares his spell and are shocked to see one of the strongest demons that exist, a tiger demon. Shin thinks about how he might be going a bit overboard, but says that he is a little upset and wouldn't mind blowing off some steam. He finally unleashes the attack that's magic covers the forest, and everyone is stunned to see the massive damage it has done. Thanks for watching part 2, 4,000 likes to let me know you want a part 3.